What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? At my cousin's wedding, they did the thing where the groom removes the bride's garter and tosses it to all the single guys. I guess none of the guys wanted to be next to be married, because once the groom tossed the garter, no one grabbed it. It just landed on the ground a few feet in front of a crowd of motionless guys. The groom tossed the garter 3 times before one guy half-heartedly picked it off the ground. The bride wouldn't look at any of those guys for the rest of the night. So let's see. Groom changed who his best man was and didn't tell the original BM until the start of the ceremony. Bride and groom asked a guest to bartend the reception at the reception. Groom dirty danced with his stepmom, full hands on ass. Bride and groom hauled their wedding party up to do a choreographed dance to Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Lights, but didn't give them any pre-warning or teach them the dance. That song is 8.5 minutes long. Wedding was at a scenic boarding school campus during the summer. Guests were told dormitories were complimentary to stay in. Guests were not told there would be no bedding provided or account in the building. Groom later reviled everyone who stayed in a dorm asking for money. Same bride and groom chose another friend's wedding reception as the right setting to yell at a third pair of mutual friends for not including them in their wedding party. Not the couple. The pastor kept saying "Our Heavenly Father, Daddy God" while marrying them. My uncle not only brought up his daughter's ex-boyfriend in his speech, but talked about their toxic relationship for a solid 5 minutes. I highly recommend preparing a speech before talking in front of a room full of people. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. Did everyone laugh, or was it meant to be serious? I mean, if it wasn't a joke and was an actual call from God, I think it would have been pretty big news. The minister, or pastor, used to date the bride and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom, if he ever died not to worry, he'd take care of her. I was shell-shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding, but couldn't quite find a legit one. I wasn't a guest, I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him, while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. I wish I knew how the couple is doing now. Yikes. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about 2 lovers in 1800s. In front of like 300 people. Sorry, engagement ceremony? What's that? This was Marizo, the bride's family. One of my first classmates to get married. We were 19. Had a small reception. Mostly family and friends from high school. Nothing wrong with that. They decided to auction off the garter belt, and whoever won took it off the bride. Most of us were poor college students, so the only people bidding were her dad and uncles. It was super uncomfortable. They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally batshit crazy, like submissive in the bedroom and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus, and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eyed Joe and my stepsister having her reception at an honest-to-God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. When I was 11 my cousin got married for the 3rd time. I never really liked her because A, she was 37 when I was 11. We didn't have a lot in common and B, she was pretty full of herself. The wedding itself was fine, pretty boring but fine. Then we get to the reception. We were told we had to sit down as soon as we got there. Some people found it weird, but I've only been to one other wedding before this. Her other marriages were when I was little. No kids were allowed at her weddings, so I didn't think anything of it. The bride and groom then make a huge dramatic entrance and everyone awkwardly clapped for them as they strutted around the room with actual crowns on their heads. The bride then gets the microphone and hands it to her mom and asks her to say something she loves about the bride. She then tells her mom to pass it on and says she wants everyone in the room to say one thing they absolutely love about the bride. Not the bride and groom, not their relationship, just the bride herself. It was super awkward. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before, so I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like, no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. Giving horrible vows and speeches. A part of my family has the habit to use any family gathering as a moment to remember loved ones who died. That's not a comfortable habit for me, but to each his own. However, it becomes very weird when wedding speeches and even vows start to include great uncles who died more than a year ago, and the only people who actually knew him are my grandparents. Yes, the vows. And not even in an interesting way, but just if only Uncle Barney could have still been alive while we are getting married. To be honest, our entire family is horrible at giving speeches. There's 2 brothers, one of whom is my dad, and 2 sisters. My parents can only make joke speeches. The uncle and his family make dry lists of things they do. For example, his wedding speech for his son was a 10-minute monologue about renovating the couple's kitchen. One aunt can only boast about achievements their family members have gained. If there's no achievements, there's no speeches. The 4th is the one with the death speeches. Bride entered to Bravo Hit soundtrack blasting on boombox. Civil service that lasted a few minutes starting at around 1 PM. She leaves to same blasting Bravo Hit soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 PM. There is no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars will be served. We are also told the venue is locked until then, so there is no place to wait. My girlfriend and I leave with a crowd of people to across the street to an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out there. We all get told to knock it off and come wait back at the venue in the hall. So we sit in the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More Bravo Hit music, of course. Place emptied out pretty quick as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. A guy knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone, just made like a public event on FB or somehow assumed people would know when/where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. I went to a wedding with my ex a few years back. It was one of his fraternity brother's wedding, and apparently the bride's parents were ridiculously conservative. So conservative that they have super edited versions of every song the DJ played, including bleeping out the word shots from Shots by LMFAO. Also, it was a dry wedding, so this rendition of the song was almost too on the nose. Oh, I have to. One point the bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song, so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song, and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone, legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. Not the bride and groom, but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young, after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned, but they clearly loved each other, and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes, both Christian. Anyway, come the wedding day I'm sat next to the bride's father at the reception and I can see he's looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like "not ideal," "would have preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances," etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo, leaving his speech behind. I'm not ashamed to say I swiped it and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom, and I'm happy to say they are still happily married 20 years later. Dude, you are the best man. That's the type of thing a legendary best man does. Your friend made a good choice. You were totally there for them on their big day. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. Bride shows up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California in an open field, no water, no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit. The groom shut it down. And when she refused to change her clothes, the groom decided to leave her looking stupid, and they never got married. Edit. I spoke with my uncle, and it turns out he had speculation that his fiancée was sleeping with her personal trainer. When she showed up in her yoga outfit, it was all he needed to call off the wedding. She ended up married to her personal trainer and divorced again. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. I've known a few couples who've changed their name to something distinct that is neither partner's original last name, but they meant it as a symbol of their relationship, not a way of hiding from a credit rating. My mom and Mel insisted on doing a stagge, a bit of theater often, to mock the bride and groom by showing embarrassing pictures from their childhood. Cringeworthy all by itself, but we explicitly asked them not to, and they went against our wishes. So when they performed their stagge, everyone was annoyed and embarrassed. When we finally made it through that ordeal, we wanted THD party to resume, but my Mil did another stagge, and we were about ready to kill her. Instead of throwing rice, or confetti, or sprinkles, or anything like that, the bride and groom asked their friends to save all their empty jewel pods and throw those as they walked down the aisle. The friends obliged. "Please chuck garbage at us as we leave the church," sure sets a tone for the marriage. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like, but he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way, and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house, because that's what you do when in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his sex life and his kids. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Well, aside from the 2 hours late part, that could be cool. I was at a wedding when I was 8, and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they had done like an awards show. So the DJ opened up an envelope, announced their names, they were handed an award statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an awards speech. In the right hands, it would have been funny, but the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature, so it was just awkward. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember this. I went to a wedding once where they did a potluck. I guess it okay depending on the type of wedding, but the reception was at a fairly nice venue. The wedding couple was like an hour and a half late, and their best man didn't have a speech ready, so it went on for a very painful 15 to 25 minutes, also stating in there that they are going to have great sex now that they are married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, who were from church. By the time me at like table 15 got to eat, I was lucky if I got something that was kept warm in a crock pot, but everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception, but I bet most food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh, also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say okay, that's enough. The whole thing was weird. Oh, also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say okay, that's enough. I'm picturing him spraying them with a water bottle. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. I really hope when he told them all what he was doing he signed off by saying may the best man win.